What's up, everybody? Dan Canobbio, Inside Boxing Live, and we are here just moments after David Benavidez picks up a unanimous decision win over Caleb Plant. Fun fight, fun card from top to bottom. Four really fun fights. But the main event was the biggest one, of course, and it was David Benavidez picking up a lot of momentum from the sixth round on, outlanding Caleb Plant by a very wide margin from at the seventh round on. And this fight played out exactly how we kind of predicted. We thought that Caleb Plant would start off hot. We thought he would move around in that big ring that he requested. He would outbox Benavidez, and then Benavidez would catch him late. That's pretty much what happened in this fight. Plant early on was sticking and moving like he always does, but it always comes down to it. The same thing happened with Canelo Alvarez, is that he just runs out of steam. He doesn't have power. He doesn't have pop. He doesn't have anything that will keep his opponent off of him. And I didn't think that Benavidez looked outstanding tonight. I thought he looked good. He wasn't doing it. He wasn't letting his hands go. Wasn't jabbing. Barely threw any jabs in this fight. Midway through the fight, he was averaging about 10 jabs thrown per round, and that's well below his average. But he did find Plant late, and that's what's most important. He threw 132 jabs, Benavidez, in 12 rounds. So I'll do the math right there. Landed 23% of his jabs, 43% of his power. That's the big thing in this fight. He limited Plant to only 91 landed punches. And I thought Plant, I had him up 4-2 halfway through the fight, Caleb Plant, but he didn't land anything early that stopped Benavidez in his tracks. He didn't really land anything of note at all. He was just more of the fact that he was getting out of the way and holding, which Kenny Bayless, hey man, what were you doing in there? One of the worst referee performances we've seen in the last couple of years. I think it's done time for Kenny Bayless to think about retiring, because he just looked really slow in there, but that's a story for another day. But Plant wasn't landing anything of note. He wasn't pushing Benavidez back. Same thing as with the Canelo fight. He wasn't really respecting him. I thought Benavidez needed a few rounds to warm up. He needed a few rounds to get out of his own head. And we talked about this with Algieri on the pre-fight show. Was temperament. Temperament was going to play a big role in this fight. And Benavidez, I thought, obviously overtrained. He came in at 166, came in actually below Caleb Plant. He was fired up from the first press conference. He said he wanted to put him in the hospital. And when fighters talk like that, and when fighters overtrain, they tend to get away from their game plan. They tend to not look like what they look like usually in there. And that was the case with Benavidez. Threw well under his career averages for punches thrown, 551 punches thrown. And he won the fight going away. That's probably one of the lower totals for Benavidez. How many? 46 per round? 46 per round. My producer just gave me that, Bob Canobbio. 67 coming into the his fight averages, and he was down to 46. So 20 less punches thrown per round for Benavidez. But that's he knew what type of fighter he had in there with him. And that was a guy that doesn't have much offense in Caleb Plant. Tough as hell. I think Caleb Plant comes out of this fight with the respect of the boxing community. All those jokes are now over. This guy went toe-to-toe with Canelo Alvarez. He went toe-to-toe with David Benavidez. Never went down. And, man, he had a nasty cut over the eye from a headbutt. Was taking big punishment from the 8th, 9th round on. Never went down. Made it to the last bell. They hugged it out afterwards. Love that. I would say throughout the 7th or 8th round, I thought, maybe these guys can fight again. Like, I want to see this again. But I think we need to see how it's going to play out with a fighter like Caleb Plant. He just doesn't have the pop. He just lacks that big punch. And he looked good for 7-8 rounds, but he'll eventually run out of steam. But now everything looks to Canelo Alvarez and David Benavidez. That's the fight. Benavidez called for it afterwards. I mean, every fan has been calling for it. Media members have been calling for it. It's time for that fight to happen. We're going to see what Canelo Alvarez decides to do next. His next fight is May the 6th, and it's coming from Mexico with John Ryder. So that's what Canelo has lined up. But September's wide open. He's either going to be fighting Bivol in a rematch at 175, or I think it will be Benavidez. Obviously, I want to see him fight David Benavidez. And it'll be interesting to see if Canelo decides, you know what, I should get Benavidez now before he gets any better. I thought Benavidez looked great in there, but he could be beat. Canelo Alvarez is going to take a lot to beat David Benavidez, but I think a lot of it is mental with him. Was his first real big fight. It was a real big grudge match. And I think that played a role in it and his slow start, and it played a role of him getting away from what has made him great. Maybe Canelo Alvarez takes advantage of that. Or maybe was Benavidez as, maybe this Benavidez only goes up from this type of fight. Interesting to see. But everyone wants to see Canelo Alvarez versus David Benavidez. That's a fight I want to see. There's clearly the top two guys at 168. That's the fight that everyone in boxing wants to see. As for the entire card, it was a really good one. Cody Crawley opening up the show, going toe-to-toe with Abel Ramos. Loved that fight. Crawley afterwards with an inspirational message, fighting depression. Dad committed suicide. Hell of a story. Easy guy to root for. That was a good fight. A really good opener. And then we went right into Chris Colbert and Jose Valenzuela. That was just, I don't know what the judges were seeing there. Wouldn't be a pay-per-view. We didn't get a bad scorecard. I thought Valenzuela won. He knocked him down early, landed some big shots. But the thing with Valenzuela, he's very inconsistent. It's the same thing with Colbert. Both two inconsistent fighters letting each other back into the fight. Venezuela, I thought, could have got Colbert out of there numerous times and didn't. And he said it after the fight. I should have got him out of there. And that's what happens when you don't get a guy out when he's hurt. So Colbert gets a win at 135. Would not be shocked if they ran it back. Then we saw complete destruction. Jesus Ramos just destroyed Joey Spencer. Good God. Joey Spencer was a guy that a lot of fans were kind of scratching their heads when they would see him on these big Fox cards and these big, prospect of the year from the PBC, when you had guys like Stephen Fulton in there and other prospects coming up the ranks. And you saw tonight Spencer get exposed a little bit. And you saw the budding star of Jesus Ramos, who's going to be a big player at 154 pounds. So fun pay-per-view. Can't deny it was from start to finish. There was 4 compelling fights. We talked about it coming in. All these fights had something at stake, and they all delivered outside of that one-way beatdown from Ramos over Spencer. What we're going to see now with Canelo Alvarez, that's the big story now. That is what it's going to be. The big story coming out of this fight is, will Canelo take on Benavidez? He's going to be asked about it a lot at that Ryder press conference and the Ryder lead up and the Ryder fight, because Canelo's expected to beat John Ryder. So you're going to see a lot of questions coming his way about David Benavidez. A lot of pressure is going to be put on Canelo. And it's interesting because Canelo, coming off the loss to Bivol and a ho-hum performance against Golovkin, there's many talking about that maybe he's in the back 9 of his career. Been up there with a lot of big fights. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But Benavidez picks up the win. Huge win for Benavidez. The signature win that he's been looking for in his career. Picks it up in dominant fashion. Weathers the early storm from Caleb Plant. Ultimately takes him out with a huge. What round was that massive round? Where the 10th round, when Benavidez landed, what was it, 43-8. 43 punches landed in the 10th round for Benavidez. Good God. He only landed 10, 20, 29, 39, 38 in the first 5 rounds. So it took him a little bit to warm up, but once he gets going, he's one of the best combination punchers in boxing. Only going to get better. You keep forgetting that he's like 25, 26 years old. I mean, good God. This was his coming out performance. And shout out to Caleb Plant, a guy that has taken on big fight after big fight. Canelo, Durrell, Benavidez. Not a lot of guys can say that they're taking on the best. And he didn't go down in this fight. Made it to the end, has everyone's respect in boxing, and they even hugged it out at the end. It's one of the worst, the biggest grudge matches I've seen, biggest lead up, an old school vibe to it, but I knew they'd hug it out at the end. So there it is. David Benavidez picks up a huge win. We'll be back with Chris Algieri on Monday with a wrap-up episode. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe.